you know, I think that it's just the landscape, that combination of hills and ocean, feeling like you're at the edge of a continent, and then there's this kind of Los Angeles, Hollywood thing that happens. I've never quite been there. I've gone around the perimeter of it, and but it's always a presence. I think.
Right. Well, you have an essay in a book called My California, and I was thinking maybe you could tell us a little bit about the book and then read the first paragraph or so.
This is a wonderful project. It's from Angel City Press, and Donna Wares edited it. And it was basically created to address this huge funding problem in California. California right now is like last in the nation in arts spending. Which is pretty bad.
Considering we're the most populous state, yeah.
We really couldn't get much worse.
Yeah.
So Donna came up with this project, and all the writers donated their writing, 27 different writers, you know. And it's a great project. Long Beach just chose it as their one book, so the whole city will read it.
That's wonderful.
It's really exciting, and so we were asked to write about California, our experiences of California. So this is an essay, and I wrote it about going down to see San Diego during these fires, actually. They weren't even out when I went down there. My grandma had a cabin that my mom was living in out in the hills, out in East County. So we weren't sure how it fared. The fire was pretty devastating back there. It's called Returning After Fire. It's Halloween morning, 2003. For almost a week, fires have been devouring homes and charring acres of manzanita and pine along the eastern border of San Diego. We are driving through the Viejas Indian Reservation, just off Highway 8 in East County. White ash is so heavy on the ground it looks like snow. We drive past the deserted casino and outlet mall, taking a dirt road through the smoldering mountains, the back route into Descanso. After 5 days, the mandatory evacuation order has finally been lifted, but the main road is blocked by fire engines and Department of Forestry buses. My brother-in-law's driving, my mom and stepdad are next to him in the front seat, my sister and I sit in the back. We point out anything that looks like a sign of hope, a deck that survived, a house impossibly intact in the center of a charred circle. On this familiar, unrecognizable road, we are going to find what remains of my mother's house.
So what remains?
It actually survived.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, it actually survived. But there were these conflicting news reports that the whole town had been gone.
Right.
So we really didn't know until we got there. And it was a time when you really feel that connection of place, when you feel it threatened, you know.
Well, this is an edited book, My California. You've also been an editor or co-editor of several books yourself. How did you get involved in that process? And then maybe you could read some work from that.
The first book that I was a co-editor of was this Poetry Daily. One of my things I'm involved with is doing web work. And there's this great website called Poetry Daily, poems.com, and it's kind of the standard for poets. And I knew the people that ran that site or came to know them. And I said, you know, you really got it. There's this whole cross-marketing idea. So I approached them, and I said, you guys really got to come up with a book. And so they agreed that they would do it and let me come on as a co-editor. So that was the first book that I became involved with and kind of started as a process. And then that also led me to California Poetry, which is the big one.
Right.
And that's it's a huge book, covers California poetry from the gold rush to the present. And that was edited with Dana Gioia and Jack Hicks. And I learned a lot from that project. That was kind of my graduate degree. So.
Well, two very different books. I mean, Poetry Daily is you know, there's a poem every day, and your thing is organized around the calendar. And then The Gold Rush to the Present.
Yeah,
It's a
really
big book, but
huge.
that's a big span of time. I edited a book about Chicago literature that went from the beginning of Chicago to the present, and I know that it's really difficult once you sort of get into it. You see there's more and more stuff that you didn't realize, and
Right.
it's more and more difficult to sift through things. I especially found it difficult to decide writers who were living in the area and might be mad if they were left out, or would be happy if they were put in. How did you guys handle that process?
Well, we tried to kind of keep it balanced with certain things. We didn't put in too many younger poets because I was really, I was kind of more the managing editor, and I was learning doing this. So the poets were kind of selected by Dana and Jack primarily, and then I worked on gathering information on those poets, and we worked together on selecting which poems would represent them. One of the things we wanted to do in this book was to include pretty detailed biographies of the poets.
Right.
So to give a sense of not just the poems, but of that whole poetry culture.
Right, and
California.
it is a great resource there because sometimes the biography is longer than the
Yeah, it is.
than the entry.
It is, and and immediately, well, actually, before it was done, I had a desire to include a lot more people, especially living poets, and they just, you do see everybody that you're leaving out, and that's hard. One of the things we did is we decided to define California poet very strictly as someone who'd either been born here and spent most of their life here, or somebody who had lived here more than half their life.
Okay.
So that eliminated a lot of
Right,
people
right.
because California is such a
Transient
state.
Well, were there any big surprises that you found, poets that you hadn't heard of that were terrific?
Yeah, there were a few. My very favorite was Nora Mae French.
Nora
There's
Mae
this-
French, okay.
And I loved her. Also just learning more about their personalities. Joaquin Miller was this really dramatic, flamboyant poet who really had a lot to do with the way people perceived the West, the Wild West. I mean, he was before, any of this Buffalo Bill Cody and Wild Bill
Right,
Hickok. He would come in and give poetry readings with this bare skin, like that he'd carry over, and then he'd put it on the ground and give these, just proclamations. And
Right.
he was long hair, buckskin clothes.
You've also been involved with a local poetry solo press with Glenn Alushai. How did you get involved editing for that magazine?
Well, just from knowing local poets and working in workshops with poets that had been involved with solo. David Oliveira, who was poet laureate before Barry Spacks, who has now moved to Cambodia, but will be back soon to give a reading. When he moved to Cambodia, it kind of created this void. And one of the things that I was able to do was come in and work with Glenna and Jackson on that, and that was really fun.
Well, that's an interesting journal because it's been around for a long time. It's a really local journal too at the same time. I mean, it takes writers. Glenna was on the show not too long ago talking about her desire to bring South American writers into its pages.
Yeah.
But you do see a lot of people from the area too.
Yeah, it's gone all over, and in fact, Solo, a journal of poetry, has done its last issue, and she's now reincarnated it. It becomes different things. But if you go to solopress.org, she's got all the things she's done, including books that she's published.
And you're now editing with the Center for Black Studies at UCSB.
Yeah.
What are you doing there?
I primarily work with Haitian studies, and we're doing a lot of work with Katrina right now. But the journal I edit there is the Journal of Haitian Studies, and I'm also working on a book of poetry by Haitian women. So it's kind of something that I got into unexpectedly. It's very interesting.
It, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to your own stuff. Can you read another poem?
I can. Let's see. I'm going to read Last Night, another one of my bad relationship poems. And this poem was in the Hudson Review. It's called Last Night. When the sun sets and he isn't home, she walks, not to be waiting. But she leaves a note. Back soon. Her only message, only wish. After all, she didn't think he'd stay. No plans, so no surprises when it ends. The dishes wait unwashed. Bitter stains stretch like shadows on the tablecloth. Once you believe in finding gods in men, you understand their restlessness as faith. the way she feels his truth against her skin, the rough edge of a matchbook, while she grieves to see her Savior's lost and lost again. God save the church that she takes refuge in, the sanctuary given fools and thieves, this silent girl who loves a man who leaves.
Dark tone,
Yeah.
as you said, is often the case with your poetry.